Hello everybody, welcome back to the Northern Forge. Today I'm going to be taking you through rebuilding my power hammer. For those of you that saw the short I posted the other day, my power hammer is currently broken. It's not supposed to come off. The bolt that I used originally for the shaft goes in through here, just snapped off the other day. So I'm going to be rebuilding it and I'm going to be doing some upgrades.
Here I have laid out all the new parts that I'm going to be putting into the power hammer. Starting at the top, I have a 14-inch long, 3/4 inch diameter keyed shaft. Next, I have two flange mount bearings, same 3/4 inch diameter. Then I have three keyed hubs, also 3/4 inch diameter, going onto that shaft. Two of those hubs are going to be for mounting the cam. The third one is going to be for mounting the pulley. Lastly, sitting under it all, you can see the new pulley that will replace the old bicycle wheel I had on there. This pulley is using a 3D printed perimeter that actually creates that pulley shape, and then I have that attached to a circle cut out of plywood, attached with a nice strong construction adhesive, and then the individual plastic pieces are also solvent welded together. Check out the description for Amazon links to the purchased parts, and there will also be a link down there to Northern Forge 3D printing, where you can get a copy of the files I used to make the pulley. Alright, now we're going to get on with the actual build. I'm going to start by removing the springs. That way I can take the hammer arm and flip it 180 degrees completely out of my way for the rest of the project. Now that the hammer's out of the way and I've got the springs removed, I can move on to removing the bolts and taking off the old bearings. The old drive shaft is just a 1/2 inch bolt, so I'm going to take off the lock nut that I had on the back side. Then I'll remove the bolts that are holding those bearings on. And after taking off that first bolt by hand, I decided that I was going to use my brain and went and grabbed my impact driver to take off the rest of them. When I built this hammer originally, I had problems with the hubs that I built slipping on the old drive shaft, so I actually welded the hubs directly to the shaft, which unfortunately means the only way to get this back out is to cut the shaft with my cutting torch. And my cut on the outside of that right hand side of the shaft was just a little bit too rough. I couldn't get the shaft back through the hole, so I'm just going to cut it a second time on the inside of the frame, and that'll drop it right out. And now I have to take off the old hubs because I am going to be reusing this cam. I'll just start by taking out the 1/4 bolts, and I'm going to be setting those aside so that I can reuse them on the new hubs with the same cam. After the bolts are out, like I said, this has been welded together, so I'm just going to use an angle grinder to cut the old hub right in half, and then I can pry both pieces off. Now the hub is all removed, so I just need to drill out the center hole from the original 1/2 inch up to the 3/4 so that it'll fit that new shaft that I'm putting in. As you can see, the shaft fits right in there. I'll have to drill out new mounting holes for the 1/4 inch bolts to go through the wooden cam and bolt the hubs on. Unfortunately, with these hubs, the holes are positioned such that when I flip one of them around to go on the other side, they don't quite line up all the way. And because it's keyed, I can't really just spin it until they do line up. So I'm going to use 2 holes that almost kind of line up, and then the other 2, I'm just going to pick the 2 holes at 90 degrees, and I'll drill new holes in this back hub to get this all put together. Now that the cam is done, it's time to work on mounting the hub for the new pulley and getting that ready to go on the shaft. For the pulley, I'm only going to use a hub on one side, so I don't have to worry about the issue with the holes not lining up. I did run out of 1/4 inch hardware, so I'm actually going to be using some 3/8 bolts to mount this. No reason to do that except for that I just ran out of 1/4 inch bolts that were long enough. And the last step before I can start putting everything together, I have to embiggen the holes in the frame that the shaft needs to go through. I originally drilled these out the first time, but I don't have a 3/4 inch drill bit that will go through the steel, so I'm just going to use a plasma cutter, and I'm just going to rough cut out the holes bigger than the 3/4 inch shaft. Since I have bearings in there, it doesn't need to be a snug fit or anything, it just needs to let the shaft go through. Now finally it's time to put everything back together. I'm going to start by mounting the bearings. I chose these bearings because they have the exact same mounting pattern as the 1/2 inch bearings I was using before. Otherwise I probably would have gone up to a 1 inch shaft, but unfortunately that would have changed the bolt pattern and I didn't want to drill out new holes or rebuild the frame. And you'll see I go ahead and start putting this together, but I had a good idea, I think. I'm going to go ahead and flip the bolts around this time because the head of the bolt is actually thinner than the nut, and so it just sticks in towards the pulley a little bit less, gives me a little bit better clearance on the inside, makes it a little bit more spacious in there. Sliding the shaft in the first time is just a little bit tight going through that second bearing. These are self-aligning bearings, which means the bearing can rotate within the housing, which unfortunately does mean that the first time you put them in, they might not be lined up. So I'm going to grease the housings. That'll let them spin around a little bit easier. And then I also put a little bit of grease on the end of the shaft. That should just help it slide through those bearings just a little bit smoother. The cam is on. I did have to put the cam on a little bit loose in the hubs just to compensate for the alignment on those two sides not being 100% perfect. But once it's in position, I'll just grab a couple of wrenches and I'll tighten down the bolts from both sides, and it'll be nice and snug. And unfortunately, my camera died while I was putting on the pulley, so you'll just have to imagine me sliding that onto the shaft, putting in the key, and then tightening down a couple of grub screws to hold it in place. Now, before I put the hammer back in place, I want to check to make sure that everything is spinning true and that nothing is shaking too much, and just make sure that the cam and the pulley are both spinning nicely and that everything looks like it's going to work. And now for the moment of truth, and probably what you've all been waiting for. I just got a piece of wood in here because I didn't have the forge hot. Time for a test run. As you can see, this is actually running a lot smoother than it did before. There's significantly less shake, significantly less wobble. I'm very happy with the way this turned out. Now here's just that same view from the other side. Anyway, thanks for watching all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to see more and drop a comment below with suggestions for what you want to see me make. And also, if you're interested in building something like this, go ahead and check out those Amazon links down in the description for the parts I ordered there, and the northernforge3dprinting.com link for the files I used to print that pulley. Have a wonderful night.